For the rest, it is not difficult to see that our epoch is a birth time, and a period of transition. The spirit of man has broken with the old order of things hitherto prevailing, and with the old ways of thinking, and is in the mind to let them all sink into the depths of the past and to set about its own transformation. It is indeed never at rest, but carried along the stream of progress ever onward. But it is here as in the case of the birth of a child, after a long period of nutrition in silence, the continuity of the gradual growth in size, of quantitative change, is suddenly cut short by the first breath drawn. There is a break in the process, a qualitative change, and the child is born. In like manner, the spirit of the time, growing slowly and quietly ripe for the new form it is to assume, disintegrates one fragment after another of the structure of its previous world. That it is tottering to its fall is indicated only by symptoms here and there. Frivolity and again ennui, which are spreading in the established order of things, the undefined foreboding of something unknown, all these betoken that there is something else approaching. This gradual crumbling to pieces, which did not alter the general look and aspect of the whole, is interrupted by the sunrise, which, in a flash and at a single stroke, brings to view the form and structure of the new world. But this new world is perfectly realized just as little as the newborn child, and it is essential to bear this in mind. It comes on the stage to begin with in its immediacy, in its bare generality. A building is not finished when its foundation is laid, and just as little is the attainment of a general notion of a whole, the whole itself. When we want to see an oak with all its vigor of trunk, its spreading branches, and mass of foliage, we are not satisfied to be shown an acorn instead. In the same way, science, the crowning glory of a spiritual world, is not found complete in its initial stages. The beginning of the new spirit is the outcome of a widespread revolution in manifold forms of spiritual culture. It is the reward which comes after a checkered and devious course of development, and after much struggle and effort. It is a whole which, after running its course and laying bare all its content, returns again to itself. It is the resultant abstract notion of the whole. But the actual realization of this abstract whole is only found when those previous shapes and forms, which are now reduced to ideal moments of the whole, are developed anew again, but developed and shaped within this new medium, and with the meaning they have thereby acquired.
How the implicit qua relatively undifferentiated form latent with possibility becomes a more differentiated form that is true to the way its potential form is constituted is clarified in Hegel's own words. The plant, for example, does not lose itself in mere indefinite change, he writes. It has a distinct directionality, in the case of conscious beings, purpose as will. From the germ much is produced when at first nothing was to be seen, but the whole of what is brought forth, if not developed, is yet hidden and ideally contained within itself. It is worth noting, in this passage, that what may be brought forth is not necessarily developed. An acorn, for example, may become food for a squirrel or wither on a concrete sidewalk, rather than develop into what it is potentially constituted to become, notably, an oak tree. The principle of this projection into existence is that the germ cannot remain merely implicit, Hegel goes on to observe, but is impelled towards development, since it presents the contradiction of being only implicit. What we vaguely call the immanent factors that produce a self-unfolding of a development, the Hegelian dialectic regards as the contradictory nature of a being that is unfulfilled in the sense that it is only implicit or incomplete. As mere potentiality, it has not come to itself, so to speak. A thing or phenomenon in dialectical causality remains unsettled, unstable, in tension, much as a fetus ripening toward birth strains to be born because of the way it is constituted until it develops itself into what it should be in all its wholeness or fullness. It cannot remain in endless tension or contradiction with what it is organized to become without warping or undoing itself. It must ripen into the fullness of its being.
More generally, evolutionary schemas may be forced to abandon the old model of the tree and descent. Under certain conditions, a virus can connect to germ cells and transmit itself as the cellular gene of a complex species. Moreover, it can take flight, move into the cells of an entirely different species, but not without bringing with it genetic information from the first host. For example, Benvenisti and Todaro's current research on a type C virus, with its double connection to baboon DNA and the DNA of certain kinds of domestic cats. Evolutionary schemas would no longer follow models of arborescent descent going from the least to the most differentiated, but instead a rhizome operating immediately in the heterogeneous and jumping from one already differentiated line to another. Once again, there is aparallel evolution of the baboon and the cat. It is obvious that they are not models or copies of each other. A becoming baboon in the cat does not mean that the cat plays baboon. We form a rhizome with our viruses, or rather our viruses cause us to form a rhizome with other animals. As Francois Jacob says, transfers of genetic material by viruses or through other procedures, fusions of cells originating in different species, have results analogous to those of the abominable couplings dear to antiquity and the Middle Ages. Transversal communications between different lines scramble the genealogical trees. Always look for the molecular, or even submolecular, particle with which we are allied. We evolve and die more from our polymorphous and rhizomatic flues than from hereditary diseases, or diseases that have their own line of descent. Drunkenness as a triumphant eruption of the plant in us. Always follow the rhizome by rupture, lengthen, prolong, and relay the line of flight, make it vary, until you have produced the most abstract and tortuous of lines of n dimensions and broken directions. Conjugate deterritorialized flows. Follow the plants. You start by delimiting a first line consisting of circles of convergence around successive singularities, then you see whether inside that line new circles of convergence establish themselves, with new points located outside the limits and in other directions. Right, form a rhizome, increase your territory by deterritorialization, extend the line of flight to the point where it becomes an abstract machine covering the entire plane of consistency. Go first to your old plant and watch carefully the watercourse made by the rain. By now the rain must have carried the seeds far away. Watch the crevices made by the runoff, and from them determine the direction of the flow. Then find the plant that is growing at the farthest point from your plant. All the devil's weed plants that are growing in between are yours. Later, you can extend the size of your territory by following the watercourse from each point along the way. Music has always sent out lines of flight, like so many transformational multiplicities, even overturning the very codes that structure or arborify it. That is why musical form, right down to its ruptures and proliferations, is comparable to a weed, a rhizome.
What high satisfaction do I enjoy through the system which my understanding has thus completed? What order, what firm connection, what comprehensive supervision does it introduce into the whole fabric of my knowledge? Consciousness is here no longer that stranger in nature, whose connection with existence is so incomprehensible, it is native to it, and indeed one of its necessary manifestations. Nature rises gradually in the fixed series of her productions. In rude matter she is a simple existence, in organized matter she returns within herself to internal activity, in the plant, to produce form, in the animal, motion, in man, as her highest masterpiece, she turns inwards that she may perceive and contemplate herself, in him she, as it were, doubles herself, and, from being mere existence, becomes existence and consciousness in one.
Victor reminded us 2 centuries ago that humanity is nature rendered self-conscious, that we speak for a fullness of mind that can articulate nature's latent capacity to reflect upon itself, to function within itself as its own corrective and guide. But this notion presupposes that we exist sufficiently within nature and are sufficiently part of nature to function on its behalf. Where Fichte patently erred was in his assumption that a possibility is a fact. We are no more nature rendered self-conscious than we are humanity rendered self-conscious. Reason may give us the capacity to play this role, but we in our society are still totally irrational indeed. We are cunningly dangerous to ourselves and all that lives around us. We do not make the implicit meanings in nature explicit, nor do we act upon nature to enhance its inner striving toward greater variety. We have assumed that social development can occur only at the expense of natural development, not that development conceived as wholeness involves society and nature conjointly.
responsibility of the most conscious of life forms, humanity, to be the voice of a mute nature and to act to intelligently foster organic evolution.
Vote for Cactus.
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 Vote for Cactus.